My name is Derek Miller. I have 39 years old, I live in Boulder, Colorado, and I'm going to tell you how an unexpected turn in my career almost destroyed everything I built, but also gave me the chance to show who I really am. For almost 14 years, I was one of the strategic managers at Northern Crest Logistics, a family-owned transportation and warehousing company based in Denver. I joined when the company was still small with less than 20 employees, and I saw everything grow. Team, revenue, partnerships. Many said that my commitment was behind some of the company's most solid contracts, but none of that seemed to matter the day Logan, the founder's son, took over as the new executive director. Young, ambitious, and with ideas that seemed to have come from investment forums on Reddit, Logan didn't seem interested in the company's history, the people who built it, or the fundamentals that supported it. I met him one afternoon, while filling out reports in a shared room. He walked in without knocking, wearing a suit that was too expensive for someone who hadn't tried anything on yet. I remember the way he looked at me, as if I were an old obstacle in the way of something new he wanted to build. "Miller, I want a quick chat in my office," he said. Not a good day. That bothered me, of course, but I followed. I've always been the type who believes that respect is shown calmly, with work, with posture. I walked into his office, and before I could settle down, he snapped, "You're being dismissed," without beating around the bush. No plausible justification. Just a dry, cold, and poorly explained statement. I tried to understand why. After all, my department had just reached important goals. But he didn't want to talk. He said he needed people with more agile thinking, and that the company needed to reinvent itself. It was a disguised way of saying that I was a burden. I returned to my table without raising my voice, without creating a scandal. I looked at each object that I represented there. My photo frame with my daughter's photo, my notebook with 5 years of meetings written down by hand, the blue mug from the 2015 logistics convention. I gathered everything carefully, like someone packing a bag of memories. Colleagues understood. The looks were heavy, confused. Some came to ask me what happened. Others just remained silent, not knowing what to say. I smiled at everyone with the calmness of someone who knows that this wasn't the end of the line. I just didn't yet know that it was also the beginning of a turnaround. That night, sitting on the porch at home, with the view of the mountains that had always given me peace, I couldn't sleep. The reason for the dismissal made no sense. Even more so because of a crucial detail. I was the sole manager responsible for the partnership contract with Orion Technologies, an international company that represented more than 40% of Northern Crest's revenue. I was the only one authorized to sign with them. Only I had participated in all the meetings from the first proposal to the final phase, which, coincidentally, was scheduled to be concluded 2 days later. Did Logan not even know that? Or did you think you could take on everything with the arrogance of someone who believes that their surname is worth more than their competence? The next morning, my cell phone rang. Unknown number. I answered reluctantly. "Derek, this is the Senior Grayson," the voice of the company's founder, Logan's father. "I just found out what happened. Why the hell did you leave the company yesterday?" I explained, trying to contain my emotion. He was silent for long seconds before letting out a muffled exclamation. "That can't be right. The contract with Orion, you were the main name, correct?" "Not just that, sir," I replied. "I am the only one authorized under the terms of the agreement. Orion demanded this because of past episodes with competitors." There was more silence. Then, the sound of papers being quickly leafed through, a sharp knock on the table, and then, "Derek, he didn't see that. He didn't read the details. He just fired you. This is a disaster." At that moment, the indignation began to give way to something more powerful. Awareness of my value. Logan had made a huge strategic error, a mistake that could compromise not only the negotiation with Orion, but also Northern Crest's reputation in the sector. By now, Mr. Grayson seemed to have figured this out, and Logan still had no idea. I sat there with the cell phone still warm in my hand, realizing that, for the first time in a long time, the situation was in my hands. I could say no. I could negotiate. He could demand that, if he were to return, it would be under new conditions, with real guarantees. It didn't take me long to realize. I wasn't angry. I was in control. After hanging up the call with Mr. Grayson, I spent a long time just staring at the blue sky of Boulder, a sky that ironically contrasted with the whirlwind that was spinning inside me. I knew Logan had shot himself in the foot, but what to do with that? Get up in a hurry and run back to the company? Ask for my position back as if nothing had happened? No. I had spent too long being underestimated, and this moment, as strange as it seemed, was a golden opportunity to change the rules of the game. It wasn't long before my phone started ringing again. First, it was the contracts coordinator, then someone from the legal sector. At 10:20 a.m., I received a text from Logan, brief, direct, without any emotion. "We need to talk urgently. Please return as soon as possible." Not even an apology. Not even an attempt to disguise the panic that was probably already beginning to set in. I decided not to respond. Instead, I organized my documents related to Orion Technologies, mentally reviewed all the points of the negotiation I conducted personally, and then drafted a short, polite email to Mr. Grayson. In it, I said that I would be willing to meet, but under certain conditions. I wanted to talk to him directly without his son present, and I would only discuss the contract again if my authority was formally recognized. Just like that. At 1:04 p.m., I received confirmation. A meeting scheduled for the next morning at 9 a.m. in the founder's old office, a place that was rarely used except in critical situations. It was what I needed to make sure the situation had truly escalated. When I arrived at the company building the next day, I used the main entrance. No badge, nothing customary. Just my presence there caused a buzz. I saw the curious looks, the whispers. People knew something was happening, and that I was part of it. Mr. Grayson met me standing with a firm but clearly shaken expression. He had grayer hair than I remembered, and the tired eyes of someone who had just discovered his legacy was at risk. "Derek, thanks for coming," he said bluntly. "Logan made a serious mistake, and now we are about to lose the biggest contract in our history. I want you to help us avoid this." I took a deep breath. That was my chance to redefine my role in the company. "I'm cool," I replied, looking straight into his eyes. "But I need guarantees. A new contract, with clear roles, complete autonomy in negotiations with Orion, and, most importantly, no interference from Logan. Not now, not later." He nodded immediately without hesitation. I agree the following days were somewhat silent but dense, the kind of silence that precedes something bigger. On the outside, the company seemed to be breathing a sigh of relief after its success with Orion Technologies. But inside, the halls of Northern Crest were thick with tension. Many knew that the storm had not yet passed. It had merely changed shape, and in the center of it, there was still Logan, now more contained, but far from having accepted his fall. Even without an official position of command, he still walked around the office as if he had control over everything. I tried to talk to employees, make forced jokes in cafes, use loose phrases like, "Everything will be sorted out soon." But there was something in his eyes. A frustration inflated by the humiliation of having been exposed by his own father, and replaced, even if temporarily, by someone he had dismissed without any consideration. I, on the other hand, was focused on reorganizing projects in the strategic expansion area. The trust that Mr. Grayson had placed in me, now formalized by a new contract, gave me support and autonomy to restructure processes that had been frozen for years. However, I knew I needed to maintain vigilance. Logan might be officially out of the game, but he still had allies within the company, people who had been promoted by him, or who feared his influence if he returned to power. And it didn't take long for signs of sabotage to begin. First, a monthly report that I had finalized with the team simply disappeared from the system. In its place, an incomplete version appeared, with wrong numbers, sent by email as if I had been responsible. Then a refund request for my last trip to San Diego was rejected, claiming that the request was out of date, even though it was sent the day after I returned. In corporate environments, the problem is rarely scandal. It's slow wear and tear, doubt planted little by little, credit subtly undermined. I knew what was happening, and I knew I needed to act before these small cracks turned into a silent implosion. It was then that I decided to document everything. Every strange email, every system error, every unauthorized change, everything recorded, printed, filed. I also started using a physical notebook where I wrote down minute details. Times, names of those involved, suspicious behavior. It wasn't paranoia. It was strategy. I couldn't afford to be caught off guard. One Thursday afternoon, one of the compliance analysts, a young woman named Tasha who had been my intern years ago, discreetly called me into the printing room. "Derek, can I show you something?" She looked nervous, looking around before opening her notebook. "I found a recent access to the contracts server with your login. But this access happened on a shared machine, outside of its working hours. And there was a change in an Orion document. I felt my stomach drop. Can you see who did this? The IP leads to the terminal next to the pantry, and the time matches the period in which Logan was here, talking with the marketing people. It was the confirmation I needed. He had started to set me up, and he was using my own history as a weapon. But this time, I was prepared. That night was long. I reviewed each document again. I organized everything into physical and digital folders. I saved copies in the cloud on a flash drive and left a printed copy with my wife, just in case. He knew he was dealing with someone who had no limits when he was cornered. The next morning, I looked for Mr. Grayson. I didn't ask for a formal meeting. I just knocked on the door and waited. "Derek," he said, surprised. "Is something wrong? We have a problem, and it needs to be treated immediately." I walked in with my briefcase in hand and, without hesitation, showed the documents. I presented the irregular accesses, the inconsistent data, the attempts at tampering. I didn't speculate. I didn't accuse. I just showed the facts. Grayson was silent for long minutes, analyzing each paper. When he finished, he looked at me with an expression that mixed pain and disappointment. I wanted to believe he would learn from his mistake, but I think I was wrong again. "What are you going to do?" I asked. He didn't respond right away. He just picked up the phone, made an internal call, and scheduled an emergency meeting with the audit committee for the following Monday. And, looking directly at me, he said, "You will be present. Not as a whistleblower, but as an interested party. If he's trying to bring you down, then he has the right to face it head on." I sat firmly. I knew the worst was yet to come. But now at least, I was no longer alone. The news that there would be an extraordinary meeting with the audit committee spread through the building like a silent wildfire. No one knew exactly why, but rumors ran wild. Some said it was about budget cuts. Others talked about reviewing international contracts. But anyone who really paid attention to internal movements knew that the problem was Logan, and that the siege was closing. I spent the weekend between reports and thoughts. I couldn't relax. I knew the time for the exhibition was near. I wasn't scared, but there was a different kind of anxiety, similar to that of an athlete before an important competition. I had done everything right, kept all the evidence, acted ethically and discreetly. Now it was time to lay it all bare, and see how the truth would be received. On Monday morning, I arrived at the office early. The meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m., but at 8:30 a.m. I was already in the meeting room with my files organized. At 9:50 a.m., committee members began to arrive, including the Vice President of Operations, the Director of Finance, and 2 external advisors. David, the head of audit, came in next with a laptop and a brown briefcase. And finally, at 10:11, Logan showed up, late and with the same cynical smile as always. "Good morning, everyone," he said, as if it were just another routine meeting. When he saw me sitting at the table, his expression changed slightly. He didn't expect my presence, but he soon recovered. "I thought this was an internal meeting," he muttered, as he pulled up a chair. Mr. Grayson replied without even looking at him. "Derek is here at my request, and I recommend that you listen carefully." David began to present the report. It was a meticulous sequence of digital records, improper access, changes to files, and attempts to attribute failures to third parties. Everything was tracked to terminals used by Logan or his direct assistant, who, according to the crossing of times and logins, was not even in the office on the dates of the accesses. Logan tried to deflect. "This is a misunderstanding. Anyone can use a shared computer. You are relying on coincidences. It is clear that they are trying to discredit me because I made difficult decisions." But his voice no longer sounded confident. The sweat on his forehead, and the constant restlessness in the chair, said more than his words. David then displayed the icing on the cake, an exchange of messages between Logan and another manager, suggesting re-evaluating Derek's image to ensure long-term stability, and planting doubts about his management. The room fell silent. Grayson, who had been silent until then, finally spoke. "I gave you a second chance, Logan. I thought you understood what it means to lead, but you preferred to play dirty, tarnish the name of someone who saved this company, and compromise values that took us decades to build." Logan was left without an answer. For the first time, he seemed to realize that his manipulations had lost their power. Grayson stood up. "From now on, you are suspended from all activities related to Northern Crest. The council will decide in the coming weeks on your permanent stay, but I can tell you that you have lost my trust." Logan opened his mouth to protest, but was interrupted by David. "We have more. It's not just about Derek. We discovered similar patterns of sabotage involving other employees who left the company in the last year. There are more things to be investigated." He fell silent. I knew it was the end. When Logan left the room without saying anything else, there was a brief moment of charged silence. Nobody celebrated. There was no mood for that. But I felt like that moment was more than a personal victory, was a change of tide, a type of justice that rarely happens in corporate environments. And this time, it was happening before my eyes. In the days that followed, Northern Crest underwent a purification of sorts. The atmosphere, previously tense and stuffy, began to transform. People looked each other in the eye again. Conversations broke out in the hallway. Shy smiles reappeared in the pantry. It wasn't just about Logan. It was about the culture he tried to impose, and which was now being dismantled. For my part, I returned to my work with more focus than ever. There was a lot to do, but now I knew that my place there was not a favor. It was recognition. 2 weeks had passed since Logan's suspension, and even with his official absence, his name still hung over the company like an uncomfortable echo. There were doubts, of course. Some people still feared that he might return, that the council would back down, that everything would be nothing more than a temporary scare. But inside me, something had already changed. I was no longer the same man as before, not the same one who lowered his head, who accepted being invisible to preserve a supposed stability. That was over. Mr. Grayson called me into his office again. This time, the atmosphere was less tense. He seemed lighter, despite the tiredness visible on his face. "Derek, I've been thinking a lot about what this all represents. For me, for the company, for you." I nodded in silence. I knew there was more. You had courage, not only to face a humiliating situation, but to keep our heads straight, be ethical, and still protect what we have built. Many people in your position would have simply walked away, and rightly so. But you stayed. He fought. And above all, he acted with integrity. He then pushed an envelope towards me. It's all there. A proposal to officially take over the Strategic Development Directorship. It is an executive position, with direct access to the board and freedom to implement changes to the company's culture. It's not just about your performance. It's because of the leadership he demonstrated, even when no one was looking. I opened the envelope and read the document. It was more than a promotion. It was a new chapter. If I accept, I want to have an active voice in decisions that affect the team. I want to restructure the evaluation processes, the reporting channels, and create an environment where no one needs to go through what I went through. Neither me nor the others who left silently. Grayson nodded, smiling discreetly. That's exactly what I expected to hear. I accepted. Returning to my new role was like entering a family home, but one that had undergone renovation. The walls were still there, but the spaces had changed, and with them people were changing too. Many came to congratulate me, but with a different kind of respect. The respect that comes not from authority, but from coherence between speech and attitude. I started talking to employees from all sectors, from fleet drivers to the IT team. I wanted to understand your pain, your fears, your suggestions. I discovered sad stories of people who had been removed due to cultural incompatibility, when in reality they were only questioning absurd decisions. People who resigned due to emotional exhaustion, or because they couldn't handle the toxic climate that Logan had created with his management of appearance and vanity. One of these conversations especially stuck with me. It was with Javier, one of the night warehouse coordinators. He took me aside at the end of the day and said with teary eyes, "When I heard that you had been sent away, I thought about leaving too. I thought the company was lost. But when I saw you come back, and saw what you did, I knew maybe I still had hope." Those words impacted me more than any position or bonus. It was proof that our attitudes, even in the shadows, inspire light in others. But of course, not everything was rosy. While we reorganized the house, the audit committee finalized the full report on Logan's actions. And the content was even more serious than imagined. Falsified emails, manipulation of financial data, attempts to divert funds to an external consultancy that did not exist. The situation was so serious that it could no longer be considered just an internal punishment. The council acted quickly. An extraordinary meeting was called and, in a unanimous vote, Logan was dismissed with just cause, losing all benefits associated with the position. The decision was not publicly announced, but everyone within the company knew about it. He left silently through a side door, like a character who has lost his own narrative. And me? Follow. Now, firmer, more lucid, and with a clarity that can only be achieved after surviving the storm of contempt and come back stronger. Logan's permanent departure marked a turning point, not only for Northern Crest, but also for me as a man, professional, and leader. What started as an unfair dismissal turned into a rare opportunity, rebuilding not only my career, but the very structure of an entire company, recovering values that seemed forgotten. In the following weeks, I dove headfirst into projects that had previously been stalled due to pure politics. I established internal active listening committees, a new whistleblower protection policy, and a more transparent promotion process. Nothing revolutionary, just the basics that, ironically, had been ignored for so long. I also started to actively participate in meetings with representatives of other companies in the sector. In one of them, I was invited to speak about resilience in corporate environments. And it was there, in front of an audience that included former competitors and experienced managers, that I realized how much my story resonated with many others. Men and women who were silenced, underestimated, discarded, and who, like me, resisted. Perhaps this would be the greatest victory of all. Use my scar as a sign of real leadership. At the office, I noticed small daily changes that made me smile. Employees who previously avoided my presence now came to my office to discuss ideas. Newly hired young people who said they heard about what happened to you in Logan and felt inspired to make a difference. Even the cafeteria, once silent and monotonous, had come to life. People were talking again, not with fear, but with hope. I also received dozens of anonymous messages left in the suggestion box that we had implemented. Some contained painful accounts of situations that were now being faced openly. Others just said, "Thank you for staying." It was then that I definitely understood that my stay was not just a personal decision. It was an act of resistance that turned into a collective example. And as for Logan, I heard you moved to Austin and tried to open a disruptive consulting for traditional businesses startup. From what they told me, it didn't go well. Not for lack of resources, but for lack of truth. People like him may rise quickly, but they rarely build anything lasting. A building built on arrogance does not support the weight of reality. Today, when I walk through the halls of Northern Crest and hear laughter, genuine conversations and ideas being shared without fear, I know it was worth it. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't always pretty, but it was real, and that's what remains. If you followed this story this far, I really want to thank you, not just for listening to my story, but for share this space of humanity with me. Subscribe to the channel, because stories like this deserve to be told and heard. Here, each story is a window to something bigger. Courage, dignity, transformation, and you are part of it. I want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced something similar? Have you ever been unfairly fired? Have you ever been sabotaged by someone who had power but no character? Tell us here in the comments. Your story can inspire someone going through the same situation, and together, we create a stronger community. And if this story touched you, tell us what you learned from her. What would you do differently if you were in my place? What action would you take? Here, every voice matters. Thank you very much for being with me until the end. See you in the next story. Until then, and never forget, dignity cannot be negotiated.